We're learning the third Sikha on Parshas Noach in Chelek Chof on page 30. The shir today is being learned L'Nishmas Rabbi ben Yamim and Rav Menashe Koltman. In Pasuk Vayizker Elikim es Noach v'skol hachaya gomer. In the Pasuk where it says that after the Mabel and Noach was in the Teva, that Hashem remembered Noach and all the animals and so on in the Teva. Rashi Vayizker Elikim. Rashi quotes the words from the pasuk Vayizker Elikim and is mefarish and explains, Zeh Hashem midas adin. The name Elikim is a name which is judgment. Midas adin hu v'nebcha lemidas rachmim. Here it was transformed into being an attribute of mercy. Al yidei tfilas hatzadikim, through the davening of the tzadikim in that time, Noach and his children. Now, the wickedness of the wicked will do the opposite. It will transform mercy into judgment. Shenema, as it says before the Mabel, that Vayar Hashem kiraba ras ha'adam v'gaymer, Hashem saw the great evil amongst people, and Vayemer Hashem, and here it uses the name of Hashem, Havaya, which is the name of mercy, Emche, that I will erase, I will wipe out all people. And V'hu midas rachmim. The name Havaya is the name of Hashem's mercy. And here it's being used for the negative because it was transformed into being used for judgment. That's what Rashi says here, explaining Elikim, Vayizker Elikim in this pasuk. Now in pasuk, Vayar Hashem kirab ras ha'adam v'gaymer vayem Hashem emche. Earlier on, in this pasuk, in the end of Parshas Bereshis, is doch da wie Rashi allein sagt da mit Pirushay dieselbe Schwierigkeit wie in unser Pasuk. As Rashi himself points out, the same question comes up there as in our Pasuk. Why does it use the name of Hashem, a name of mercy, when it's speaking about judgment, that Hashem will wipe out mankind? As the Reifen ha'anhage was retzich in Pasuk is l'chayre nit behesem zu dem Shem umidde was steht dabei, that what it says in that Pasuk and the name that it mentions there do not fit. It says Emcha, Hashem will wipe out, which is judgment. Steht the Lashon the Shem Havaya, it says the name Havaya, which is Shem midas harachmim. Und bei Vayizker Gomer Elikim Shem midas adin. And here, when it says Vayizker, that Hashem remembered, the positive, here it uses the name Elikim, which is the name of judgment. Und von deswegen bewahrend es nicht Rashi dort. And nevertheless, Rashi does not question or clarify why earlier does he use the name Havaya regarding Emche, when Hashem is wiping out. Davon verstehen, so the question here is, was stellt sich Rashi in spätdigen Pasuk b'Parshas Seinu? Why does Rashi stop and explain this when it comes to the later Pasuk, when this question comes up, und nicht auf dem friedigen Pasuk Vayar Gomer in Parshas Bereshis, and not when the question comes up the first time in Parshas Bereshis. Und noch mehr, furthermore, Dafke da, specifically here, B'Pirushay Vayizker Elikim, when Rashi explains the words Vayizker Elikim, Bavarnt erst Rashi Oiv dem Oivtu in the friedige Psukim Vayar v'Gomer Vayem v'Gomer. That only here does Rashi come back to explain also the Shem Havaya in the previous Psukim as Midas Harachmim is Nisapach Gevaron LeMidas Adin. That over there, mercy was transformed into judgment. So if Rashi is addressing it, why is he waiting until here to address this question? So from this itself, it's clear. As dort alasar, that earlier, and when you learn that pasuk itself, is nitok and hechrich from pasuk of dem pirish. You're not forced to say like this interpretation. Und dafke from pasuk vayizker lekim is da azar stark kayachachel pirushay as midas adin nepchal midas arachmim. It's only here when you come to this pasuk of vayizker lekim. There's a strong proof to this interpretation that judgment was transformed into mercy. Biz as das is ba lelamed oichab de friedige psukim vayar gomer vayem gomer, and therefore this now comes and clarifies also regarding the earlier psukim that when it says there Shem Havaya as oich dort meint es as the midas harachmim is nefcha lemidas din, that the attribute of mercy was transformed into an attribute of judgment. That's what we must say, why Rashi is addressing it only here, and then coming back to address what it says before, Shem Havaya, regarding Emche, regarding a Midas Adin. You cannot suggest and say, as bizim pasuk vayizker Elikim, that up until our pasuk, where it says vayizker Elikim, veist man nit in derech hapshat, as Shem Havaya is Midas Harachmim, and Shem Elikim is Midas Adin. We're not yet aware of the fact that the name Havaya is the attribute of mercy, and the name Elikim is the attribute of judgment. This is mashma l'chayre from Lashon Rashi, as it would seem from Rashi's language. When Rashi begins and says, Zeh Hashem midas adinu, v'hu Shem midas harachamim, Rashi comes and lets you know the fact that Elokim is a name of judgment and Havai is a name of mercy. A signal shel chiddush was Rashi learned Arais from them pasuk, seemingly saying something new, a new concept that Rashi is learning only from this pasuk here. But this cannot be the case. Because in addition to the fact that this itself would have to be clarified. Coming from pasuk Vayisker Lekim, Hab Ma Yidiyah in Hinyan Hashemis, Mer Videfriedige Psukim Vayar Hashem Gaimer Vayem Hashem Gaimer. How is there any more of a proof in our pasuk Vayisker Lekim that the name Lekim is a name of judgment more than in the psukim before Vayar Hashem Vayem Hashem that Hashem is a name, Havai is a name of mercy? Is oid ve'ikir, an additional and another main point there is gleich and aschalas ha-teire, right in the beginning, the first pasuk of the Teire of Bereshis, bara elikim, hatas shein Rashi gelost wissen b'pirushay. Rashi already let us know in the pshat on the pasuk there why the Teire begins with the word elikim. V'lo yoma bara havaye, doesn't say the name of havaye because shebetchilo olav machshava levroisay b'midas adin. The first thought Hashem had was to create the world with an attribute of judgment. And he saw that the world will not survive this way, and therefore vehiktim midas harachamim. Therefore, he first brought the attribute of mercy to create. Here it says first Shem Havaya and then Shem Elokim, meaning that Shem Harachmim was first in creating the world. So Rashi already told us that Elokim is din, judgment, and Havaya is rachmim, mercy. So we can't say that Rashi is waiting for the second time it says here by Elokim to make this point. Okay, so the question here remains, what's the pshat? Why does Rashi only address it the second time and not the first time? So we'll understand this by first addressing what Rashi says on Berei Bara Lekim. So again, the words of Rashi are that Hashem saw that the world will not survive, exist, if it would be created only with judgment. And therefore, v'hiktim midas rachamim, Hashem created first with mercy, and v'shitva l'midas adin, and it was partnered together with the attribute of judgment. So what can we see here from what Rashi says? From Lashon Rashi, the hiktim midas rachmim, that Hashem, the partners, that Hashem partnered and created with both together, rachmim and din. But Rashi says, first comes the mercy, is mochach, it's clear, as der Eibishtat nit nar mishatet gewen midas rachmim and midas adin, that it's not only that both together participate in creation, judgment and mercy, as yen hages ha'olam zal sein von beiden midas and a gleiche histatfus, and therefore the world is conducted by both in an equal participation. Hashem gives the attribute of mercy a first place that comes before the attribute of judgment. We decided in pasuk as Rashi is learning this out from the order in the pasuk, first the name Havaya and then the name Elokim. Und das meint, dass midas harachamim is der ikke. And therefore what this means is that Hashem creates with both, but the attribute of mercy is primary. Das heißt, b'shas die Welt ist in a matzav was es weckt sich. When the world is in a situation where you're weighing, whether things should be according to mercy or with judgment. Is midas harachmim kodemes or b'meila machriya. So the one that will tip the scale is the one that comes first, which is the attribute of mercy. A kapanim is muvan. So it comes out, we understand from this, as als was tut sich in Welt, everything that's going on and happening in the world, muss sein leute hachra psak von midas harachmim. It has to be according to the conclusion of the attribute of mercy, because that's the one that's primary and stronger, and the one that is hiktim comes first. Oich the einshim de la maila, including the punishments that happen from Hashem, that come from Hashem, cannot happen unless you have the agreement of the attribute of mercy. If there could be something that happens in the world which is just a pure judgment without agreement at all of the attribute of mercy, so then this could lead to a situation where the world cannot continue to exist. So the shutvis here is that in everything that happens is always a participation of both midas adin and midas harachamim, and even furthermore, the midas harachamim is the one that's machriya, the one that is saying, is the one that's concluding and agreeing that this judgment should happen. Midas adin muz oich zayin v'shitva midas adin. There must be an attribute of judgment as well, as Rashi says that Midas Adin participates as well. Varam vibalt, as the Matorah from B'riyas Ha'olam is, Rashi is mefarish b'shvil HaTorah. Since the purpose of creation, as Rashi says, also right in the beginning of Torah, is for the sake of Torah. Was meint bepashtus as nit nur as es soll sein the Torah, nor as Yidden b'shvil Yisrael sollen lernen Torah mekayim sein ihre mitzvahs. But it simply means not just that Torah exists in the world, but that Yidden, which the world was created for them as well, should learn Torah and fulfill its mitzvahs. Muss doch sein adin schar v'einish zu versichern as Yidden wollen lernen Torah. So therefore there must be judgment, meaning reward and punishment, that will guarantee that the Yidden will learn Torah. Was das geht Welt is chosakim, and this provides the world its merit to exist. So there must be judgment as well. Aber von deswegen kedei der Elam soll haben makim. In order for the world to have its existence, muss euch sein midas harachamim. There also must be the attribute of mercy. Va'adarabe ba'ofen azi is the ikar machriya. Even more so, the midas harachamim is primary, and that's the one that is the final conclusion in everything that happens in the world. This is what we learn out from what Rashi tells us regarding the midas adin and midas harachamim in creation. So now, pizeh is verstandig bepashtus. Based on this, we can very simply understand was Rashi stellt sich nicht auf dem, was the pasuk sagt in Bereshis, vayar avaya gomer vayemer avaya emche. Why it says in the pasuk the name of attribute of mercy, havaya, when it speaks about Hashem's decision to wipe out mankind. Onit Elokim, it doesn't say the name Elokim. Because vibalt, as we explained since, it is that as hiktim midas harachmil and midas adin, that the attribute of mercy comes before and is stronger than the attribute of judgment. Even punishment in the world could also only happen when you have the agreement and conclusion of the attribute of mercy. Therefore, darf der Pasuk nutzen dabei dem Shem midas harachmim. So therefore, when it says here, the einish, the punishment of the mabel, the pasuk must use the name Avaya, which is the attribute of mercy. But because if the pasuk would say and use the name of judgment, Elokim, that the source of the punishment comes from the name Elokim, then there would be a big question here. Wie kann sein, as mitzad midas adin Elokim allein, so sein die achlote on anhage von emche? How could the pasuk say that there was a decision made to wipe out mankind that comes only from the name Elokim, which is the name of judgment? Who is der hiktim midas rachmim v'shitval midas adin? Where is it that Rashi says that the midas harachmim comes first and it has to participate, I mean even before, together with the midas adin? The far muss the pasuk bavaranen. Therefore, the pasuk must say, as afapi as the din bepoil is gekommen from midas adin, even though the actual judgment and the actual punishment comes from midas adin, which is the name of Elokim, but nevertheless, vayomer Hashem emche, the achra psak of emche is gekommen from avaye midas harachmim. But nevertheless, the conclusion, the psak to wipe out mankind in the Mabul came from the name Havaya, which is the midah of Rachmim, of mercy, because everything in the world has to be by the conclusion of midas Rachmim. That's why it says in the pasuk, Vayomer Havaya over here. Now, Hafapi, as the Emche Bepoyol is gekommen von Elokim, even though the actual punishment, the Mabul that wiped out all mankind, happened from the name of Elokim. And wie sagt man the pasuk? Wie sagt the pasuk? Hashem emche. So how does the pasuk say Havaya, that the source of the emche, of the wiping out, the punishment comes from the name of Havaya? Wollt mir gekent empfehlen? So you could simply answer to this as das is a mikro kotzer, that the pasuk here is speaking in a short term. Wie Rashi hat schon früher mefarish gewesen, as es eine Faran mikrois schon mekatzrim l'sheinam. Rashi already explained earlier that there are psukim that speak in a short-handed language. Und es ist ki'ilu, wie es wollt gestanden, vayomer Hashem emche, durch hahaskome zu Shem Elokim midas adin. It's as if the pasuk had said and clarified that the emche comes from Havaya, because Havaya agreed to Shem Elokim, which is midas adin, that the Mabul should happen. So true, the actual judgment and the actual punishment comes from Shem Elikim, but the pasuk is saying Vayomer Hashem Emcha because you need the haskama of Shem Havaya in order for this punishment to happen. Das ist takinita zagalata pirish. True, this is maybe not such a smooth interpretation of the pasuk here. Aber das ist als glatter. It's better though, wie zum Mefarish sein, as Vayomer Havaya Emcha meint, as der Din bepoil is gekommen von Midas Arachmim Havaya. It's better than explaining that the actual judgment and punishment, in actuality, came from the attribute of mercy, Shem Havaya. It's totally not logical, and especially when you learn the simple understanding of the pasuk, as a ben adam, that a human being should have the ability through his actions or through his davening, should have the power to transform Hashem's attributes. So to say that the pasuk means to say that the Midas Harachmim itself is transformed and the source of the actual punishment comes from Shem Havaya is something which is a very novel, a very big chiddush that in Pshat, it's not simple to say this. We could understand as durch Tfille, Tshuva Chulu, when one davens und das Tshuva, kann ein Mensch mo'ere Rachmim sein beim Meibischen, a person can awaken Hashem's mercy. Other in zweiten K'tzei, or in the opposite extreme, as ein Anhage bilterit zuya, when a person misbehaves, can guide him sein, as Midas Harachmim soll maskem sein, as im kommt an einisch, that even the attribute of mercy would agree that this person deserves a punishment, was wird durchgeführt durch Midas Adin, which is then actualized through the attribute of judgment. But es legt sich aber nicht zu sagen, als Midas Harachmim Gufe soll nishapach werden und durch Ben Adam bis zu reinlegen sich zu durchführen den Weinisch. But it doesn't make sense to say simply that the attribute of mercy itself should be changed and totally transformed. And how? Through a human being. And the source of mercy itself should get involved in actualizing the opposite of mercy, which is a punishment. So this is something which is very difficult to say. So therefore, in the pasuk of Vayomer Havaya Emcha, Rashi simply leaves it as is and doesn't explain anything, because over there it's simply understood that it means that the judgment came from Midas Shem Elikim, from Midas Adin, and it says in the pasuk Vayomer Havaya because the decision for the judgment and the punishment has to be with the agreement of Shem Havaya as well, and therefore it says in the pasuk Vayomer Havaya. This is all in the first pasuk where it speaks about the einish of the Mabel. Vayar Havaya, Vayomer Havaya Emcha. Der Pirish and Vayomer Havaya Emcha Beifen Zeh, so explaining Vayomer Havaya in this way, as the Midas Harachmim hat Masken given, as es darf sein Emcha, that the reason it says the name Havaya here is because the name of Havaya, which is Midas Harachmim, agreed that there has to be wiping out the punishment that actually comes from Shem the din, Midas Hadin, kann nur Masm sein, wenn es retzach wegen Shem Havaya Midas Harachmim. This could only be said when we speak about the name of Havaya, the attribute of mercy. Because as explained before, was hittim Midas Harachmim, the attribute of mercy comes first, und sie ist der Ikir und Machria in alle Inyanim von Hagas Eilam Kana. Because this is primary, and this is the conclusion, and everything in the world is according to the agreement of Midas Harachmim. And therefore it's possible to say that even when there's an action and something in the world that is judgment and punishment, but nevertheless, we can relate it to Shem Havaya, which is the attribute of mercy, because the attribute of mercy must agree to this judgment. However, that's not the case over here when it comes to our pasuk, when it says Vayiskar Elikim. Here, the pasuk is speaking about Hashem acting in a merciful manner. So bleib schwer. So here the question remains: Wie passt dort zu sagen Vayiskar Elikim Deshem Midas Adin? Why does the pasuk use the name of the attribute of judgment in relation to something that is an act of mercy? Now, even if we'll say as da is aufgetan geworden an Inyan Neisef, that there was an additional thing that happened over here, which is not the way it's usually set up in creation, as nit nar at Midas Harachmim Goyve given of Midas Adin, that not only, as you would expect simply, but when you see that there's a chesed, there's a kindness and mercy that comes from Hashem, that would mean that the attribute of mercy is stronger and even more powerful than the attribute of judgment. No, additionally, what happened here, Vayisker Elikim meint, as Midas Adin hat Masken given auf Vayisker von Havaya. That Shem Elikim that's mentioned here means that even the attribute of judgment is also in agreement with the Vayisker, with the mercifulness of Hashem that comes from the name Havaya. And therefore it says here, Vayisker Elikim. Al derech, v'geret le'el, in Pasuk Vayemer Havaya Emcha. Similar to what we explained before regarding the Pasuk Vayemer Havaya Emcha, as it is in the order of creation, that Shem Havaya always has to agree and is first and foremost when it comes to anything in the world. Therefore it says, Dir Vayemer Havaya Emcha. So we can say here, even though it's not the regular order, but maybe here, when it says Vayisker Elikim, reason it says Elikim is because the name Elikim, which is the name of judgment, was in agreement with Shem Havaya, with the act of mercy. But we don't have to say that the actual Midas Hadin itself was transformed. But it says the Rebbe, Hata b'kein artnit l'chayre tzazagin Vayisker Blois Elikim. But there's still no room to say, seemingly, that when it says Vayisker Elikim, and it just says the name Elikim, that the schire, this that Hashem remembered, and the mercy, that this comes just and exclusively from Shem Elikim, which is the attribute of judgment. If it's only that the judgment participated together with the Midah of Rachamim. So why does it only say Shem Elikim? So therefore, Muz Rashi Mefarish Zayin as Dovert Gemeint Adova Chiddush. Therefore, Rashi must say that over here there's something novel, something new happened. As the Vayisker is gekommen von Elikim Midas Aydin Gufe. That the actual Vayisker Hashem remembering the mercy comes from the name Elikim. The source of this mercy comes from the judgment itself. Nit not hat Midas Adin Masken given zum Vayisker. Not only is Midas Adin agreeing to the Vayisker, no, das hat sich aufgetan durch Elikim Gufa. But even more so, this was actually accomplished through the name of Elikim itself. Midas Adin nevcha lemidas rachmim. The actual attribute of judgment was transformed into being an attribute of mercy. That's why it says here only Vayisker Elikim regarding this mercy. So this is the great accomplishment that happened in this case. Now, nachdem wie man muss mechadish sein, as das da metzias. Once we must say, as we see in this pasuk, that there is such a thing, that a human being can transform the nature of Hashem's midas, is mistaver. Now it's logical to say, when it says Vayem Havaya Emche, we're not going to read it as a short-handed pasuk, as explained before. Nor der Emche is gekommen von Havaya midas arachmim atzmai. Rather, the Emche, the punishment itself, came from the midah of mercy because it itself was transformed. The wickedness of the Rishayim transforms the attribute of mercy into an attribute of judgment. That's why Rashi waits to explain this only in this pasuk, to this pasuk where it says Vayisker Elikim. And once we see that this is the pshat here, we then understand that this is also the understanding of when it says Vayemer Hashem Emche, that it means that there was a transformation of the Midas Rachmim itself. However, there's something that still has to be clarified. Farvas is da gewen neitig riboy betfilas sadikim bis as midas adin zol nos hab gewen le midas arachmim. Why was it necessary to daven to such an extent, the tzaddikim that daven, that the midah of judgment itself should be transformed to behave and act in a merciful manner? The vayisker zol zayin fun elikim, that the actual remembrance should stem from the name of elikim. Uns is nit genug der Vayisker blois from Shem Havaya. Why would it not be sufficient that Hashem remembers and the source of Hashem's mercy should come from the name of Havaya? Is the beard in them? So the answer for this is that inyan from Vayisker Geimer, es Noach Geimer. When it says here, when Noach was in the Teva and Hashem remembered him, is given the Aschole from the Krisis Bris, was the Rebishter hat noch gemacht mit Noach. This was the beginning of later the bond that Hashem made with Noach. That never again will there be a mabel to destroy the world. This negated even the possibility for a mabel in the future. That was the point of that bris. And if then, in order to negate even the possibility for a mabul, is nit genug as der anhage from Vayiska soll sein, nor from Midas Arachmim. It's not enough that Hashem's mercy and Hashem remembering should come from the attribute of mercy. Midas Adin soll noch nit menaged sein, and the attribute of judgment is not going to oppose, oder afil maskim sein, or maybe even more so agree. Weil dann wollte es gemeint, as Midas Adin mit Tzadatzma get yet an art of a mabul. Because then what it would mean is that Midas Adin itself is giving room and it would agree to a mabul. It's only the Midas Harachmim that overpowers it. So that doesn't mean that there's no room, no possibility at all for a mabul. Und der Vater hat es gedacht sein in einem Eufen von Vayisker Elekim, as Midas Adin Gufe is nishapach geworden on Midas Harachmim, and therefore over here it had to be in this way that the source of Hashem's mercy came from the attribute of judgment itself that was totally transformed to be a source of mercy. Und das Dafke is Shailul the Efshari Yisef Mabul. And it's this that negates the whole possibility for a Mabul, because not only Midas Harachmim says that there should be no Mabul, but now even Midas Hadin as well also says that it sees only mercy and there's no room for a Mabul at all. This is the explanation in the Pshat of this Rashi. The Bir B'zeh, the Pnimi Yisan Yonim. To explain this, I'll pichsid this on a deeper level. Der Pasuk Vayisker Elekim es Noach v'Gomer. This Pasuk wird gesagt im Musaf der Rosh Hashanah als eine und der erste von den Psukim Zechreines. It's mentioned, and we say it in the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah as one of and the first of all the Psukim of Zechreines that we say. Is nicht verstandig, so the question on this is, der Teuchen von alle Psukim Zechreines is wegen dem Zikaron von der Bris, was der Rebbe hat gemacht mit Jeden. The content of all the Psukim of Zechreines is all reminding or remembering the covenant that Hashem makes with Yidden specifically. Because even though as the opening of Zechreines begins with that Hashem remembers creation of the world and all creatures in the world, is aber der Iker Zikaron der Rosh Hashanah verbunden mit Yidden. But nevertheless, the main remembrance, and Hashem, we're reminding Hashem, is his special bond and connection with Yidden. Und durch dem Zikaron von Neshamas Yisrael wird aufgetan der Zikaron von Kol Yitzurei Kedem. When Hashem remembers Yidden, this brings Hashem to remember and to connect to all creations as well. So if so, hein, was sagt man dem Pasuk Vayisker Elekim es Noach Gomer, was der Zikaron is negeyat zum klolizigen Kiyam Olam nach a Mabul. So why is it that we begin with Hashem remembering Noach, which is Hashem's remembrance regarding the world at large, after the Mabul, which is not related specifically to Yidden? Steht of dem de Bier. So the explanation that it says about this is, as der Zikaron, was is given far dem Krisis Bris, when Hashem remembers Noach here, and this was all as the introduction coming to then, the covenant that Hashem made with Noach, is given be'ike nit b'shachas tz'maylam. This was Hashem remembering not in relation to the existence of the world, not al Noach mitzadatzmai. It was remembering Noach for who he in essence is. And this is because of the essence of the neshama of Yidden, of whom Yidden come from Noach, and Hashem is remembering Noach because of the essence of the Maila of Yidden that comes from Noach. That's what Hashem was remembering when it says Vayisker Elekim es Noach. Noach himself, because of the etzem Mailas Neshamas Yisrael. Was the Far sagt man, and therefore we say in the Nusach of Davening, V'gam es Noach ba'ava zacharta, that Hashem remembered Noach with love. Was meant the ave pnimis va'atzmis to neshamas Yisrael. This love cannot be referring to the world in general. There's no concept of love that's related to the existence of the world in general, but it refers to the very deep essential love that Hashem has to the neshamas of Yidden that come from, that is in the etzem of Noach. But this explanation needs a further clarification. Right after we say that Hashem remembered Noach with love, is men mamshach hamizak. We continue in the nusach and davening and we say, "Bativ kedeyu b'dvar Yeshua v'rachmim." You remembered him with salvation and mercy. B'aviyachas mea mabel cholo, when you brought the mabel, and al kain zechreinoi bo lefanecha cholo, and therefore his remembrance comes now in front of you. Was das meint, as the zikaron is kedei as lozayin the krisis bris of kiyam ha'olam, which sounds like what it's saying is that the point of Hashem remembering is in order that there should be this covenant for the entire world, for the existence of the world. So how can we say that this is something that the Ava here indicates that it's only the Hashem remembering Noach because of the Maila of Yidden? Is the Hasvara bezeh, so the explanation for this is, the Krisis Bris mit Neuchen auf Kiyam Ha'olam is nit stam a Versicherung as die Welt wird haben Makiyum. When it says that Hashem makes a covenant with Noach, in order that the world will always exist and there will never be a Mabel again. It's not just simply an assurance that the world will continue to exist, and it won't be destroyed again through a Mabel. That's not what the bris is about. Nor as the oilam soll sein behesim zu the kavane v'tachlis briyasa. But rather the main point here is that the world will continue to exist in accordance to its purpose and goal of its creation. And since the world is created for the sake of Yidden, is Muban, so it's understood as the Krisis Bris is verbunden mit den Zikaron Shekadme vehivia al Noach mitzad atzmai mitzad etzam ma'alas Hashem Yisrael. So therefore it's understood that when Hashem remembers his bris that he made with the world that should continue to exist, this is all based on what comes before and what brings to this bris, and that is the bris that Hashem makes with Noach himself for the sake of Yidden, for the essence of who Yidden are. That's the inyan of this pasuk as we see it, the way it's said in the context of the psukim of Zechreines on Rosh Hashanah. Oster inyan, so now this point, as the Krisis Bris, mit Noach, of Kiyam Ha'olam, is as the Reilim zal sein masim zu kavanas abriya, that the whole covenant Hashem made with Noach for the existence of the world is not simply for the world to exist, but the world should exist in accordance to the purpose of its creation. Spiegelt sich ab in dem Eiftu von der Krisis Bris, as an anhagas ha'olam soll nit sein kin shinu v'hefsik. This is reflected by the fact that what is this covenant all about? That it's that the world will continue to exist with no mabel, and there'll be no change and no interruption in the nature of the world. As it says in the Lashon of the Bris, Oid kol yemei ha'aretz gomer, that all the days in the world, all the seasons is mentioned there further in the pasuk, lo yishbaisu, will not cease to function, that is. That's what the bris is all about. So this idea that the bris is not just about the world itself, but it's about the pnimius and the tachlis of the creation for Yidden is reflected in the fact that the bris is for the kiyum of the world, that there won't be any interruption in the world. How is it so? The head rashini in anhagas hateva, the lack of any change that there is in nature, bavaist as in them is melubish akoyach shalamayla magbala. What this proves is that in the world we have a power that's above any limits, a power of Ein Sof, of Hashem, which is infinite. That's why there's no change. Because in nature itself, as in all creations, there can't be eternity, heder ashini, a lack of no change at all. Rather, the source here is because there's a power, a godly power, which is above and higher than from any changes. Ani havaye lo shanisi, Hashem himself, which is not changed ever. And therefore, when we see that the bris with the world is regarding the fact that the world lo yishbaisu will always continue and never change, that's a reflection of the koyach of Ein Sof that's in the world. So therefore it comes out as der teike v'chaisik. Was ist reingegeben geworden in the Metzias ha'olam durch Krisis Bris? The strength and the nature of the world that was inserted in the world when Hashem made the covenant regarding the existence of the world is nit an inyan von helen v'hester. It's not a concept of concealment, which the word olam means halim, that this is Hashem concealing himself from the world. Nor fakert an inyan von gilui koyach Ein Sof. This is actually a great revelation of the infinite power of Hashem, which is beyond the concept of change, and therefore the world now has that revelation within its very nature itself. That it's a covenant made regarding the existence and the nature of the world itself, that it exists with this nature of Ani Avaya Lo Shanisi, which is from the essence of the Eibishter himself, and therefore this now is reflected and exists within the very nature of the world itself. That is the idea of this bris, that we see that it's not just simply a bris with creation, that creation externally should exist, but it's for the purpose of creation related to Yidden, which is the revelation of the Koyach Ein Sof in the world. With this we can understand what the Medrash says on the pasuk after Noach brings the karbanis, that Hashem smelled the aroma of his karbanis. This is what brought about then the bris with Noach. The Eibishter says that I will not again curse the land. So the Medrash says, as the Reach and the Chayach, when it says the Reach, the Chayach is Meramis, of Reich Shel Avram Avinu Eilam Kivshen Eish. This is the aroma that came from Avram Avinu that was thrown into a furnace of fire. Reach Shel Chananya, Mishal, Va'azariah, Eilam Kivshen Eish. And then the Reach of the fire of Chananya, Mishal, and Azariah also went to the fire, to a furnace of fire, to Amesiris Nefesh. And Reach, Doire Shel Shmad. And also the aroma of all the generations of persecution of Yidden that died, Al Kiddush Hashem for the Eivish's sake. Das heißt, what this means is, as the Mesiris Nefesh von Avram Avinu, Chanani Mishal Vazariah, und Doire Shel Shmad, hat gerufen, den Vayemer Avaye lo Eisuf Lekala Loid Geimer. This all inspired and brought out the Vayemer Avaye, the covenant that Hashem made with the world, not to curse the land anymore. That's what the Medrash says. Frekten of them. So the question that is asked in my Marim on this Medrash, was is the Reach Nechayach from Noach's Karbanis allein nit genug zu öftan die Krisis Bris of Kim Ha'olam? Why would the aroma of the smell, the Karbanis that Noach himself brought, not be enough to bring a bris, a covenant for the existence of the world? Und es hat gefordert der Reach from Mesiris Nefesh. It was necessary to have additionally the aroma of the great Mesiris Nefesh, the self-sacrifice of Yidden, Biz, the Mesiris Nefesh, from Doire Shel Shmad, including also the Mesiris Nefesh of all the generations of persecution and Galus, was the Darge, Hachi, Nailis, and Avedis Hashem, which is the greatest and highest level of a person serving Hashem to this point. Why is this necessary for the bris, for the existence of the world in general? The in them is, so the explanation for this is, since this covenant here came to accomplish that the world will continue to exist, and in this manner of loyish baisu, which as explained before means vas aleph das nimmt sich von koyach einsaif ani avai leshenisi. This means that this is a revelation of the power of Hashem, which is infinite, Hashem himself, ani avai leshenisi. On base, another point, der koyach wird nisgale dafke in und durch teva gufa kanal. And this power itself is being revealed in and through the very nature itself. That nature of world is, with all the seasons, continues going. So this is the 2 points that we see here in this bris. The Rebbe darf sein ke'en zeh b'midish adam meided, the Avede, the Reach, was bringt dazu. The Avede that brings this also has to be similar in measure that would cause such a kind of level of a bris with the creation of the world. Und das is the Avede for Mesiris Nefesh. And this Avede is specifically the Avede of Mesiris Nefesh, or Befrat, the Mesiris Nefesh from Doire Shel Shmad, especially the Mesiris Nefesh of all generations of persecution. But Mesiris Nefesh hatten sich die zwei Inyanim. In the Aveda of Mesiris Nefesh, we see expressed these 2 points. Number 1, Mesiris Nefesh weiß, dass es Ovid Avedasai in Anayfen von Loishenisi. It is an indication of the fact that this person is serving Hashem and nothing phases him. There's no changes. Kein Sach, afille die größte Halomis können nicht sterben. Nothing, even the greatest problems and concealments will not disturb him. Oder afille noch abschwachen sein Aveda, was tut mit Mesiris Nefesh. And not even at all weaken the Aveda that he does and ready to do to the point of Mesiris Nefesh, to die for Hashem's sake. That's on one hand. So it shows on the Loishanisi point, how much a person is ready to do no matter what for Hashem's sake. But on the other hand, this strength and this power that's revealed in Mesiris Nefesh, how? What is it that triggers this? It's the persecution and the concealment of the Galus itself that brings it, that causes it. It's known as the Koyach HaMesiris Nefesh is meir in Zman HaGolus mer vi b'Zman HaBayis. The power of the soul of a Yid that has the power of self-sacrifice shines and is expressed more in the time of exile than it is when the Beis HaMikdash was standing. It's the concealment and darkness of Golos itself that inspires and triggers and brings out the power of Mesiris Nefesh of a Yid. So therefore it comes out as the Helen v'Hester Gufe. It's the very concealment itself. But B'chitzayni is Meinei Ma'akev Avodas Hashem, which externally is something which is an obstacle and is stopping a person of serving Hashem, is Gufe brengt Areisis Chaskos and Avodas Hashem. It's this darkness itself which is causing actually an encouragement and strengthening in serving Hashem. To the point that a Yid gives up his life and is going completely out of all of his limitations to serve Hashem. When a Yid strengthens himself over all of these disturbances or tests and challenges, and gives his life away to Hashem, is there the mid gufim mevatel dem helen vehester. With this itself, he will then annul the concealment on his gala, and then what revealed is, as the kavanah from them nisayim vehelen vehester is given, so I reisrufim bayim and avodah shalom alim b'didav akbala. That what really was this test all about? It's not a true entity for itself at all. It's just there. Its whole existence in the first place is only to trigger by a yid this level of serving Hashem out of his boundaries, out of his limitations. So therefore the point is, it comes out that the Mesiras Nefesh has these 2 points in it. On one hand, it's the boundless dedication of the yid to Hashem, and it also is triggered by the very darkness and concealment itself. And therefore, this is the kind of Aveda that brings also the krisis bris of Hashem with the world, that it's a revelation of the infinite power of Hashem in the world, and within and through the very existence of nature itself. This is also the explanation for was der Vayiskei, das hat gebracht the krisis bris, why it is that when Hashem remembers, that brought this covenant, hat gemusst sein von Elikim, midas adin atzma, hat gedacht nepach werden, se midas arachmim. As explained before, it comes from the name Elikim, which means that the attribute of judgment itself had to be transformed to become an attribute of mercy. What does this mean? Why is this a necessary point there? That Inyan, this point that we explained before, as teva gufas obrengen sugili elikos, that nature itself causes godly revelation. Ken zechayvta nar durch dem was the shem Elikim. Their makar teva. This is only accomplished by the fact that the name Elikim, which is the source of nature, was the fun nemtzach the hel v'hester ha'ilam. The name Elikim is the source of concealment in the world. Vet nepach l'rachmim, becomes transformed into mercy. Was in Yonai, the idea of Hashem's mercy is gili elikos, godly revelation. On the sibbe reishes ve'ikris to them was the reibishte is mahapech midas adin midas arachmim. What is the first and main cause for this? That Hashem transforms his attribute of judgment into being mercy. Is v'games Noach ba'av zacharta. It's what we say in the beginning of the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah and Zechreines, that Hashem remembered with love. He remembered Noach, which is the Zekarim from the Ave Pnimis v'Atzmis from the Eibishten to Yidden mitzad Mailas Neshamis Mailas Etzem Mailas Neshamis Yisrael. That Hashem remembers his very deep and essential love for the very essence of who Yidden are. They are rooted in the very essence in Hashem. The lav mikol ilam midas klal, and there, in that level, there are no attributes, there are no levels. And because there it's beyond any midas, where things are already divided into categories. So therefore, it's possible that judgment can be transformed into mercy because it's really all one. It's the essence of Hashem Himself. And this comes down into this world to the lowest place. To the point that we can nullify all concealments and covers that there is over Yidden, or things related to Yidden. As nitnar zan ze nit meinach as vashalem Yidden von Avedas Hashem, that not only should not be a disturbance, God forbid, for serving Hashem, not adarab, on the contrary. Ze werden nepach zum Messiah. It becomes transformed to be an assistance. Ze helfen arais Yidden und alles was nötigen sich. They assist Yidden in everything necessary. Und an anayfen as l'chol b'nei Yisrael haya b'mei shveisam. That for all Yid there was light in their dwelling, noch in Mitzrayim, Eretz Mitzrayim. Even when they were still in Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim Megvulim, a place of a land of restriction. Und das Werte achane kreuva. This becomes a very close preparation. Some kiyum ayid for the fulfillment of the promise from va'amdu zarim v'ra'ot seinchem, that strangers, the Goyim themselves, will be there to pasture your sheep. Bebias Mashiach tzedkeinu, with the arrival of Mashiach b'mheira v'yameinu mamish, speedily in our days.